Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 5 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a civilian stuck in a time loop with the gamer system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 81, well it's time that I head into battle Oswell, isn't it? I have to keep up appearances after all. Kazuo thought before his figure vanished. He had already appeared in the middle of the battlefield, a kunai that he held in his hand was already through an enemy shinobi's throat. The enemy hadn't even seen it coming before he had felt his throat get filled with his own blood. Thump! One down for the count, Kazuo thought as a large grin spread over his face, causing the enemies who were about to rush towards him to stop for a brief moment. It was at this moment that Kazuo heard a bell-like sound ring in his head. Ding! A system mission has been generated. Thwart Uchiha Madara's plans. Reward, Bloodline Activation 5%, 1 small grade stat upgrade. His eyes quickly wandered over the holographic panel in less than a second before concentrating on the enemy once more. What is this system doing? Is this a fucking joke? I'm a fucking Chunin, a Chunin, goddamned it. Kazuo thought before his brows furrowed even further. Hey dickheads, I'm in a really bad mood right now, so I'm going to take it out on you guys. Don't resent me, alright? Kazuo loudly said before his figure vanished and appeared next to his next victim. Just like last time, the shinobi didn't even have enough time to react before his left eye and brain were pierced by a kunai. You bastard! One of the missed shinobi screamed as they ran toward Kazuo, only to stop a split second later. A clone? One of the missed shinobi asked before lightly shaking his head and quickly rushing toward Kazuo and his clone that was standing next to the now dead missed shinobi strewed out on the ground. Immediately 4 shinobi were rushing toward Kazuo, 2 from the right and 2 from his left side. Both Kazuos quickly turned their backs to each other and rushed toward the incoming enemies. Their figures flickered as they changed positions quickly, instantly confusing and causing the enemies to slow down. Arg! With a loud battle scream, one of the missed shinobi used a body flicker of his own and appeared in front of the Kazuo on the right. His sword held up high before he swung it down with immense force. As the sword got close enough that Kazuo wouldn't be able to escape, the missed shinobi's face twisted as a large bloodthirsty grin appeared on it. I have you now, you fucker. He thought before his sword cleanly passed through Kazuo's body with no resistance at all. It had simply sliced the air after all. What? An illusion? Is this the clone then? The missed shinobi thought before he saw that the illusion of Kazuo had yet to disappear and in fact was swinging his own kunai straight toward his face. It's just an illusion. The shinobi thought, preparing to use another body flicker and appear behind the real Kazuo. SHLQ. The kunai held by the illusion passed right through the shinobi's forehead before appearing on the back of the enemy's head. Blood spattered around in an instant as if the missed shinobi's head had become a water fountain. The man hadn't even had the time to think about what had happened before the light in his eyes had died, his soul already leaving this world. The illusion of Kazuo turned around and headed toward his next opponent. The battle was a massacre. No matter what the shinobi did, no matter what methods they used, they would all pass through Kazuo's body as if he was just an illusion, whilst his own strikes were as deadly as ever. Thump! The final shinobi fell down onto the floor, his head cleanly sliced off and his leg, which Kazuo had hit with a low kick, bent completely backward. The Kazuo on the right disappeared just like an illusion as soon as the combat was over. Shursui's use of the body flicker really was ingenious. Kazuo thought as he turned his gaze to look at how Kakashi was doing. He only had one opponent left, huh? Kazuo thought before his left eyebrow scrunched up slightly. I had to die 6 times to complete this one damn battle, but he manages to do it on his first damn try and without breaking a sweat at all. Kazuo thought. He had died 6 times during the battle, and had mostly been in cases where both he and his clones had been killed at the same time by an unexpected combination of water jutsu. However, at the end of the day he had still died. Even with all that training, I guess a genius like him is really on a completely different playing field. Kazuo thought before quickly using the body flicker and appearing next to Noara Rin, who was still laid out onto the altar. I have to thwart Madara's plans? That's easy. Kazuo thought whilst a light smile appeared on his face. FSH. Kakashi appeared next to him at this moment. "Kakashi, notify Minato to come here right away," Kazuo said as he kept looking at Noara Rin. "What?" Kakashi asked, his tone clearly confused. Kazuo didn't say anything in return, merely grabbing Rin's shirt and lifting it up. On her belly, a large seal was inscribed that seemed to be so large that it covered even her entire back. "She's been made a Jinchuriki or something of the sort. Call Minato right now, we don't have time for bullshit," Kazuo said once more, his voice and eyes fierce as he gazed at Kakashi. "Right." Kakashi didn't wait any longer before taking out the three-pronged kunai from his ninja bag and throwing it on the ground. Sigh. Kazuo released an audible sigh before getting up from his crouched position next to Noara Rin. "Get ready, we're going to be fighting to the death right about now," Kazuo announced. At that very moment, Kakashi's eyes widened, in the woods at the edges of the clearing. He saw it, or rather them, tens upon tens of mist umbu ready to tear him and Kazuo apart limb for limb. Chapter 82. Seeing the dozens of enemy shinobi around them, Kazuo felt the need to curse at the world around him and to whoever assigned this mission to Kakashi. "It's Hiruzen, isn't it, that fucking rat?" Kazuo thought in annoyance before he released a slow deep sigh before taking a deep breath, his eyes focusing once more as he got ready for another hard battle. Madara might notify Obito faster and send him toward here, which means that we need to survive until either Obito arrives here or until Minato does. Kazuo thought as he spoke to Kakashi, and Rin, who was now waking up. "Kakashi, protect Rin, you are better at that than I am," Kazuo said before Kakashi nodded his head. This wasn't the time to have any arguments or disagreements. He had to trust in Kazuo's ability. "Don't ask how I can do this either, alright?" Kazuo asked as he gave Kakashi a light smile. Raising his hands forward, Kazuo channeled his chakra. In a single second, hundreds of papers started flying out of his sleeves and swirling around the group. They quickly formed a box around the three of them before their color changed from white to the color of their surroundings, effectively turning them invisible. That was only on the outside, however, as Kazuo, Kakashi, and Rin could still clearly see the white papers. "I'll be heading out. This jutsu makes you invisible from the outside. The box will start moving further away from here and will lead you to a safe enough location whilst you stay hidden from enemy eyes," Kazuo said as he arrived at the edge of the paper box. "Also Rin, don't you dare sacrifice yourself. You are now a Jinchuriki of the Three Tails and thus much more important than both I and Kakashi are to the Hidden Leaf Village," Kazuo said before disappearing from the inside of the box. At that moment both Kakashi and Rin saw the box shrink significantly and start moving towards the east. "Come Rin," Kakashi said, his eyes still lingering on the spot where Kazuo had disappeared before taking Rin in his arms and quickly walking away, making sure to keep his chakra as hidden as he could, instructing Rin to do the same. Once outside of the box of paper that he had created, Kazuo could once more see the tens of shinobi around him. They had come much closer and were now in prime attacking range. "So the mist wants to go against the leaf? You fuckers aren't even strong enough to protect yourself and you want to attack us? The greatest shinobi village in existence?" Kazuo said before releasing a scoff. "This tree rat," one of the enemies said before he quickly charged toward Kazuo. Similarly, another group of them rushed toward him. Altogether, 7 shinobi were rushing toward Kazuo whilst one of the shinobi in the back quickly instructed the rest of them to start looking for Kakashi and Rin. "Sir, we can't sense them," one of the shinobi said as he turned to who Kazuo presumed to be the commander. "There are more than 100 chakra signatures all around us. Finding which one there is almost impossible. They are also all changing positions rapidly," the shinobi said, causing the captain to release its sking sound. "Kill that bastard as quickly as possible, then we will start an extensive search." It was at this moment that the 7 shinobi arrived at Kazuo. 4 of them were already swinging their short blades, effectively restricting all movement from Kazuo as attacks were coming toward him from all directions. Instead of showing a face of distress, Kazuo smiled as his body quickly lost its color and turned into hundreds of white papers. This was another use of the paper illusion. As it wasn't a paper clone and had no combat power or sentience, it used only a sliver amount of chakra. An illusion? Where is the real one? One of the 7 shinobi who had rushed forward asked as he quickly looked around. It was at this moment that the 7 shinobi heard the sound of an explosion tag igniting. Hidden inside the hundreds of white papers that had been used to create the illusion of Kazuo's body were around 50 explosion tags. Boom asterisk boom boom. As they weren't ignited at the exact same time, they caused multiple explosion sounds. A moment later, after the smoke was cleared, the mist ninja could only see 7 charred bodies with no Kazuo in sight. Quickly search, the captain said as he ordered the shinobi. However, those would also be the last words that he would ever speak out. 2 hands appeared from underneath him, tearing through the earth as they grabbed his ankles and brought him down underneath the ground fully, not even leaving his head out. Boom! The next second, another explosion occurred, launching a cloud of dust and bits of grass and the earth into the air. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, perched atop a tree, Kazuo with a smile on his face was watching the situation unfold just as he had planned it. He had already died once so that he could reset the time and plant the hundreds of papers around the area so that he could confuse and effectively block the enemy's chakra sensing. With the captain gone, all that is left is around 60 shinobi. Kazuo's thoughts grew more and more grim as they progressed. Sigh. Sometimes I think that it would have been better to have just died back then on my first patrol mission. Kazuo thought before his body flickered and he disappeared from his location, appearing right in the middle of a group of around 20 enemy shinobi. Do you know what art is? Kazuo's voice resonated through the silent forest, causing the attention of every missed shinobi to turn toward him. Art is an explosion. Boom. With an explosion that far outweighed the previous ones, the entire ground started shaking. Before the explosions even stopped, a figure appeared just outside of the cloud of dust. And so is fire, Kazuo said as he plopped 2 military pills into his mouth and quickly gulped them down before his hands rapidly made hand seals. Fire style, Great Fire Annihilation Jutsu. Chapter 83, Fire Style, Great Fire Annihilation Jutsu. Kazuo muttered as he took a deep breath and exhaled an enormous amount of fire that seemed to engulf everything in front of him. Be it trees, shinobi, or the very ground they stood on. The fire engulfed everything. However, merely 6 seconds later, Kazuo had to stop, his chakra reserves already drained. The papers that had been moving around to block the enemy's chakra sensing fell down, as Kazuo had no more chakra to control them. Thankfully, the 2 military pills that he had taken moments earlier started doing their work at this moment, and Kazuo's body started generating back its chakra at an incredible speed. This is dangerous. If I don't use up all the chakra quickly, then I'll be dying from an overabundance of chakra, and even if I do manage to release it all, my condition after will be horrendous. Kazuo thought as he made its sking sound before quickly forming another set of hand seals. Time to really put this new jutsu of mine to work, Kazuo thought as he quickly made a single hand seal, making a shadow clone appear next to him. After this, my chakra reserves will be extremely low. Even with the military pills, the regeneration will take a few minutes at least. Kazuo thought before quickly starting another set of hand seals. Water style, enhanced water bullet. He gathered as much chakra as he could at the moment and created a water bullet jutsu that was far larger in size than all the previous ones he had done. His shadow clone meanwhile did another set of hand seals. Lightning style, shock wave. Combination jutsu, enhanced great water bullet jutsu. The shadow clone and Kazuo were completely in sync with each other. They were effectively the same person after all, and this great synergy between them allowed for the creation of a combination jutsu on the fly. The large enhanced water bullet and the shock wave jutsu combined at the same time as they headed toward the front where flames were still ravaging. ZZTTT. With the sound of lightning that was coursing through the water bullet that moved at incredible speeds, the surroundings became a flash. Boom. Water can also be used for an explosion. Kazuo thought as a large grin appeared on his face. Is that it, you missed nobodies? Kazuo said aloud, his voice clearly being heard in the ongoing destruction around him. Meanwhile, Kakashi and Rin, who were already a distance away, turned their heads. The continuous explosions could be heard, and even though neither was a chakra sensor, they could still sense the large volume of chakra being used. Every ninja was a sensor, however the difference was that some were capable of sensing much more minute chakra waves at a larger distance. However, when such a large amount of chakra was released, even a normal shinobi would be able to feel it at a distance. Kazuo, who was standing still and catching his breath, pain starting to engulf his entire body, was still smiling as he thought, "If only I had elite Jonin chakra levels, I would have been able to do this without even wearing myself out." Kazuo thought as he saw the dust clouds disappear. Bodies were strewed on the floor, however the number clearly showed that not every enemy had been caught. Tens of meters back stood 3 walls of water and 2 almost completely destroyed earth walls. So they managed to survive, huh? I guess if Minato doesn't show up, I'm dead. Kazuo thought before he saw the 6 missed shinobi who were still alive use body flicker and rush toward him. There were no words said, they only had one goal in mind: killing Kazuo. A chuckle escaped from Kazuo's mouth as he looked at the 6 ninjas making hand seals. Do they think that I would be so dumb as to just spam jutsu? Kazuo thought as the 6 small concentrated balls of water headed toward him. He had no time nor strength to dodge. SCLQH. With the sound of tearing flesh, all 6 balls pierced through Kazuo's body, leaving bloody gaping holes behind. Finally, this fucker's dead, one of the umbus said as he released a sigh of relief. They were all releasing harsh breaths. They had barely managed to survive the onslaught of jutsu that seemed to never end. Yeah, he's finally. Before the man could even finish his words, a voice was heard behind him. Dead? It was Kazuo. He had appeared right behind the group of missed shinobi who hadn't been able to notice anything as they had already let their guards down. The body of Kazuo, littered with holes in front of them, lost its color once more before it quickly dissolved into hundreds of drenched white sheets of paper. Wah! Before the man could even fully turn his head, his heart was pierced by a kunai. 1 down, 5 left. Kazuo thought as a large smile appeared on his face before he quickly used the last of his chakra to use a sealess body flicker and back away from the remaining 5 missed shinobi. It's your turn, old man, Kazuo said with a large smile. ZZZTTT. With the sound of electricity, Kakashi Hatake appeared on the battlefield, his right hand coated in a large amount of lightning chakra whilst he held a white short sword in his left hand. Kazuo had died once during the barrage of the 6 missed ninjas, and he had used that to change his plans. He had told Kakashi to come back to the battlefield at a very specific time. That was just when he was pierced by the shinobi with water bullets. The second change he had made was to conserve his chakra slightly during every single jutsu, allowing him to release 2 more jutsu which used a meager amount of chakra. The paper clone as well as the body flicker jutsu. Kakashi's figure vanished from view for a moment before appearing in the middle of the 5 missed ninja. They were already exhausted and most of their chakra had been drained by trying to block the barrage of jutsu and explosions that Kazuo had launched on them. It didn't take more than a split second for all 5 of their heads to get sliced off from their bodies. Thump 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 thump. Kakashi stood in the middle of the 5 headless bodies, the lightning chakra in his right hand quickly dissipating. It was at this moment that 3 figures appeared on the small battlefield. One was a yellow-haired man wearing a Jonin vest. The other was a young girl with brown hair and 2 purple strips going down from their eyes almost to her chin. And finally, the last one was a man covered in a white swirly suit. Are you 2 ever not going to be late? Obito, Minato-sensei. Kazuo uttered as his vision started darkening. Chapter 84. Are you 2 ever not going to be late? Obito, Minato-sensei. Kazuo uttered as his vision started darkening. Darkness quickly overtook his vision and in mere seconds Kazuo was unconscious and down for the count. Minato, who was on the other side of the clearing, immediately used a body flicker and arrived next to Kazuo, with Kakashi arriving moments later. Rin meanwhile took a few seconds longer, her speed clearly much lower than both Minato's and Kakashi's. Meanwhile, the man covered in a white suit with swirls that converged towards his right eye simply stood still for a brief moment before he immediately used body flicker to come closer to the group. Minato, however, had maintained vigilance and immediately turned his full attention towards him. Who are you? Minato asked, his voice as cold as ice and his gaze as sharp as a sword. The man stopped for a moment, almost stumbling down before he voiced out. "It's me, Minato-sensei." "Obito!" Obito voiced. Joy could clearly be heard through the tone of his voice. "Hey, get off of me," Obito said. However, at that moment he found that the suit that had protected him and enhanced his strength, or rather than a suit, it would better be called zetsu, it had restricted all of his movement. "Hey, let me go, what are you doing?" Obito loudly asked. However, he couldn't move at all. "Obito? You're alive!" Rin screamed as she started running toward her former teammate whom she had thought had already died. "Hee hee, guess we will have to follow Plan B," an eerie voice said. It was the zetsu that was covering Obito's entire body. By this time, Minato had dropped his guard significantly and Rin was already getting close to Obito. It was at this point that something clicked in Obito's mind. "No, Rin! Don't come!" He screamed. However, it was much too late. His scream immediately alerted Minato and Kakashi, and even Rin stopped for a moment, but the distance was close enough that none of them could stop what was coming. Obito's body was forcefully controlled, and in a split second he arrived in front of the young brown-haired girl, his fist cocked back quickly before it was launched toward Rin's abdomen. For a moment there was silence as Obito's zetsu-covered fist pierced through Rin's abdomen, going straight through and appearing on the other side. Cough. Releasing a cough, Rin's eyes teared up as blood was spewed out of her mouth. "Obito," she managed to utter before the fist was taken back through her body, causing her to fall down onto the ground. "No, no, no, what did you do? No!" Obito screamed, his lungs and throat burning, tears rushing down his cheeks. However, no matter how much he tried, he couldn't regain control. It was at this exact moment that his right eye, together with Kakashi's left eye, which had once been Obito's, started to swirl at immense speeds. The Kama of the Sharingan started to come closer and closer until they finally converged and formed a completely new pattern. The change caused immense pain to course through Kakashi's head, as well as a chakra drain so large that he immediately went unconscious. Obito meanwhile felt a rush of information go through his head. It was only a split moment later when Obito phased through the zetsu suit. Finally revealed himself to now the only onlooker who wasn't either dead or unconscious. "Obito!" Minato practically screamed as he rushed toward his former student. His immense speed made it so he could appear next to him in less than a second before he launched a chakra-enhanced kick toward the white zetsu, launching it tens of meters away and crashing into a tree. Minato's facial expression seemed conflicted. However, his gaze was fixed on the white zetsu, not daring to let the enemy do anything else. However, it seemed that the white zetsu had no plans to continue staying around, as it immediately started phasing into the ground before it completely disappeared from view. Even though Minato's chakra sensing was extremely advanced, he could no longer sense even a sliver of the white suit. Turning his attention a moment later toward Obito, who was on the ground, Minato opened his mouth to say something. Anything really. However, he was interrupted as a loud scream of sorrow erupted out of Obito's mouth. The amount of pain, sorrow, and hatred that could be felt in the scream was almost overwhelming. "Obito, come on, we can't stay here, grab Rin. I'll send us back to the leaf," Minato said before his gaze sharpened. "That chakra, it's a tailed beast. Did the mist seal a tailed beast inside of Rin? For what reason?" Minato thought as he sensed the chakra inside Rin's stomach start to disappear from her body, vanishing into thin air. After all, with the death of its Jinchuriki, a tailed beast would similarly enter a state of pseudo-death for a few years before it regained its physical form once more. Releasing a soft sigh, Minato walked to Kazuo and Kakashi, grabbing each with one arm before turning and walking back to Obito. The young boy was no longer screaming. Instead, his eyes were completely unfocused, bloody stains going from his right eye all the way down to his chin. "Come on, Obito, we have to bring her back to the leaf. At least there she can find a resting place," Minato said as he placed his hand on Obito's shoulder. For a moment, the young teen said nothing before he turned his head toward his former sensei. "Why didn't you stop me?" His voice was hollow, no emotions could be felt at all. "I'm sorry, Obito, it was my fault." Minato said as his expression scrunched up slightly, however he couldn't break down. He was a shinobi and so he had to endure. He had to endure for his students, he had to endure for the village, he had to endure as he was a shinobi. Endure so that the next generation can prosper, they said. Minato thought as he released another soft sigh before saying, "Come Obito. We can't stay here, new enemies might appear again. I can't fight them whilst also protecting these two and Rin's body." "Right, let's go," Obito said as he gave a shallow nod, his voice just as emotionless as before. He lowered his hand to grab his former love only to find his hand passing right through her body. His arm shook for a brief moment before he tried once more. This time he managed to touch the physical world and hoist Rin's body up with both his hands. Minato stood silent before placing Kakashi on his right shoulder and freeing one of his hands so that he could make a hand seal. "Place your hand on me." Obito didn't show any reaction besides placing his left hand on Minato's arm. A hand seal later, the four of them together with the Rin's dead body, which was already losing its heat, disappeared from view. Appearing hundreds of kilometers away, inside a simple house in the Hidden Leaf Village. The location change didn't seem to disorient Obito at all as he simply turned to walk toward the living room with Rin in his arms. It was at this moment that a voice was heard. "Obito?" It was a young woman with red hair that fell down almost to her waist. Her eyes were a clear purple that was quickly clouding up as tears welled up in her eyes. Obito stopped for a brief moment as he raised his head, his right eye a blazing Sharingan in the form of a unique shuriken of sorts focused on the person before him for a brief moment before tears once more clouded his vision. "She's dead," he said as he lowered his gaze to look at Rin, who he was still holding tightly in his arms. For a moment Kushina said no words before her eyes widened as she quickly rushed toward Obito and forcefully grabbed Rin's body from his arms and placed her on the floor. Her purple eyes changed color in an instant as she was engulfed by a red bubbly aura. "Maybe, just maybe," Kushina screamed as she let the red bubbly aura engulf Rin's body. Minato, who had already placed Kakashi and Kazuo on the couches in the living room, appeared right next to Kushina before placing his hand on her shoulder. "Stop, Kushina, she's dead." "No, Minato, if it was recent then maybe," Kushina said, her voice loud and obviously angry as tears started streaming down her eyes. "She's dead, she was made into a Jinchuriki." "If that hadn't been the case then maybe, however the tailed beast has already dispersed." Kushina, however, seemed to not hear what he was saying. No, she did hear what Minato had said, however she refused to believe it. "Then I can just give her a part of my chakra," Kushina said as she started infusing even more of the red bubbly chakra into the young girl's body. Obito meanwhile had lowered himself and stood crouched as he saw Kushina continue to inject the Nine Tails chakra into Rin. Please work," Obito thought before his eyes widened. The gaping wound in Rin's abdomen was starting to mend itself. At first, the process was slow, extremely so, however in less than a minute it had gained such speed that it had become visible to the eye. "Minato, seal a part of the chakra," Kushina practically screamed as she ordered Minato, who had already gotten to work even without her telling him to do so. "Please," Obito murmured as he watched the duo. It took another 3 minutes before the gaping wound was completely gone. Rin's body now looked perfectly fine. "Don't pour more chakra, it would only hurt her chances from now," Minato said, causing Kushina to quickly back away. The red bubbly chakra that was covering her quickly disappeared back inside her body a moment later. It was also at this moment that they finally saw it. Rin was breathing. Chapter 85. It was at that moment that they all saw it. Obito, Minato, and Kushina saw Rin's chest rise up as she took a breath. She was alive once more. She was breathing. For a brief moment, silence engulfed the entirety of the room before Obito practically dropped himself over Rin, his eyes covered in abundant tears as he almost screamed in happiness and relief. Sigh. Minato released a deep sigh of relief as he felt the muscles in his body weaken. Kushina felt the same as she used Minato's body so that she could stand. "It's not over," we need to actually get her to the hospital, as well as those two, Minato said as he gave Obito and Kushina a nod before motioning toward Kakashi and Kazuo, who were laid out on the two beds in the living room. Right, let's go, Kushina said immediately as she tried walking only for her legs to give up on her. Thankfully Minato was quick enough to save her from face-planting on the ground. Thanks, seems like I'll have to stay behind, Kushina said with a shallow grin on her face. It was clear that she was only using it to cover up the immense stress that she had and still was feeling. It's alright Kushina, I'll come get you as soon as I send these guys off first, Minato said as he helped her walk to a stool before turning around and motioning to Kakashi and Kazuo with his head. Help me get those two Obito, I'll carry Rin, Minato said as he walked to Rin and lifted her in what looked like a princess carry. Okay, sensei. Obito replied, his voice much lighter than before. In fact, it was so different that Minato almost thought it was a completely different person. Obito went to Kakashi and Kazuo and lifted each of them with one hand. With both of them merely being 12 and 13 respectively, they were both quite light, and even Obito with his body still in a bad shape could carry them. Walking to Minato, Obito simply touched his shoulder with his sensei's and in the next second, without any hand seals, Minato Namikaze teleported the entire group into the Konoha's ninja hospital. The ninja and civilian hospitals were completely different buildings, and they were also completely different in how they handled the injured. Whilst the shinobi hospital used medical ninjutsu and advanced medical techniques, the normal civilian hospital still used what could only be called primitive technology in comparison to the ninja side. They also didn't have access to any medical ninjas, so they couldn't use chakra in the treatment of their patients. Unless the civilian was willing to issue a mission request to the Hidden Leaf Village, then they wouldn't be able to be treated by a medical ninja of the leaf. Inside the ninja hospital, Minato appeared abruptly with Rin in his arms and Obito, who was next to him and carrying both Kazuo and Kakashi. Immediately as soon as he appeared, every shinobi around turned their heads to look at the new presence, their hands already inching closer to their weapons. The yellow flash. He's just as fast as the rumors. I didn't even sense him before he arrived. Different voices immediately rang out as they stared at the rumored genius of the leaf who had gained the title of the fastest shinobi in the entire elemental nations. Minato didn't spare these shinobi even a glance, though he would have in normal circumstances. These were far from normal circumstances, however. Directly walking to the hospital reception, Minato ordered instantly. His words weren't a request, they were an order. 3 injured, 1 needs a checkup, Minato said, causing the young ninja behind the reception desk to nod her head instantly. Merely moments later, the medical staff took Rin, Kakashi, and Kazuo out of Minato's and Obito's hands. You can come with me, I'll give you a medical checkup. A tall old man wearing a completely white suit said to Obito. Obito merely nodded his head before walking away. I'll see you later when I'm done, Minato-sensei. Sure, see you later, Obito, Minato replied, his expression, which had been stone cold since he had entered the hospital, finally easing up once more. Minato disappeared from view once more. However, he didn't teleport back to get Kushina as he had promised. He had a different agenda on his mind. Appearing in front of a pair of tall gates that lead into a large clan compound, Minato immediately started walking toward the inside. There was a symbol drawn on both of the large gates. It looked like a red and white fan. The Uchiha clan. No one stopped Minato, merely looking at him as he walked through the compound at a quick pace. Teleporting directly to his destination wasn't a choice, as it could be seen as a provocative move against one of, if not the largest and most powerful clans in the Hidden Leaf Village. No longer than a minute after Minato had started walking, he arrived at his destination. In front of him stood a large traditional-looking house, clearly a cut above from the houses that he had seen since he had entered the Uchiha clan grounds. It was at this moment that the front door opened, revealing a tall man with shaggy brown hair and eyes black as ink. He looked to be around his late 20s to his early 30s. What brings you here, Minato? Fugaku, the patriarch of the Uchiha clan, asked as he gave a nod in greeting. Not even inviting me in, Fugaku? Minato said as a slight smirk appeared on his face, his tone clearly showing that he had a close relationship with the man. Close enough that he could joke with him. You could have just teleported inside, however you didn't, Fugaku replied, his brows furrowing up slightly. Right, either way, I need you to come with me. Obito Uchiha has been found and has returned to the village. What? Chapter 86. What? Fugaku's voice pierced through the surrounding calmness immediately as his eyes widened, his gaze almost turning fierce as he looked at Minato. However, he knew that someone like Minato would never joke about this situation. Kakashi and Kazuo found him during their last mission. Minato said and didn't explain any further as he put his hand on Fugaku's shoulder. A split second later, the two of them disappeared from view and reapered hundreds of meters away inside of the Konoha Ninja Hospital. It was at this moment that they saw the person they had just been talking about getting discharged by the medical staff. Obito Uchiha, Fugaku said, his voice slightly raised, causing Obito to turn around and stare at who had just called him. His only remaining eye immediately focused on Fugaku Uchiha, his clan patriarch. Hello, patriarch. Obito was usually a happy-go-lucky ninja, someone who didn't have a drop of seriousness in his blood. However, even he knew that respect should be showed to the patriarch of his clan. Immediately Obito walked closer before giving Fugaku a full 90-degree bow. Fugaku remained stoic, however his fierce eyes clearly showed warmth, his voice however was just as cold as always. Always with the tough love. Minato thought to himself as his lips slightly twitched upwards. Raise your head, you will come later to explain everything to me, for now you can go and rest. Your house wasn't touched, we left everything as is. Fugaku said, causing Obito to immediately raise his head and straighten his posture before giving a nod and starting to walk out of the medical ward. I'll also need you later for a report to Lord Hokage, however you can rest for the day. Minato said toward Obito, who gave another nod before leaving the hospital. I'm sure that isn't the only reason you called me for, Minato. What do you need from me? Fugaku asked with a voice that was borderline a whisper, however Minato heard it clear as day. I might need your help later with another student of mine, Naira Rin to be precise. She could now be called a pseudo-Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails and could go berserk at any point before I fully reinforce her seal. When I do so, I'll need your ocular powers to help control it better so that the chances of a problem occurring get lowered. Minato replied. Fugaku had questions, however now wasn't the time nor place to be asking them, and so he merely gave a nod of his head before turning to head out of the hospital. I'll help. Come together with Obito tomorrow. Sure will do, Minato replied, as his eyes trailed on Fugaku before he disappeared from view. Sigh. All of them are troublemakers. Minato thought as his mind went to his 4 students. One had disappeared for months and had been considered a dead man, only for them to appear with a manjikyu and then get controlled to kill his teammate. The other was just as bad, a genius beyond any other who had become a Jonin at age 12 and then went on to get severe trauma from his dead teammate and close himself in so that almost nobody could get near him. The third had been the most normal until today, when she became the pseudo-Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails and now was at risk of going berserk. And finally the last one. On paper he was the best student Minato had ever had. He was social as well as a genius, someone who learned everything as if he was a sponge and knowledge was water. On the surface, that is, Minato knew that a normal guy wouldn't have gained Danzo's attention so easily, and even Lord Hokage had told Minato to observe him carefully. Minato had clearly seen it. The way Kazuo mastered techniques was weird to say the least. It almost looked to Minato as if Kazuo had mastered the techniques beforehand and then tried to act as if he didn't know them and was learning them at a slower pace. And so he had Kazuo learn techniques that only he himself knew, such as his own taijutsu style, but that acting of his didn't change. A prodigy beyond even Kakashi, however, he fakes it and lowers himself so that he can appear more normal. Minato thought before releasing another long-winded sigh. It was at this moment that one of the nurses called him. Sir, we have completed the checkup on all of them. None of them are in any serious danger besides Chunin Kazuo, who appears to have gone through severe chakra withdrawal. However, that has been dealt with and he is now conscious and the danger has been avoided. Would you like to see them? The nurse asked, causing Minato to immediately give a nod as he started following her through one of the numerous halls of the ninja hospital. The building's insides resembled a white maze. There was no color anywhere to be seen, and the hallways were clearly made to confuse anyone who didn't have an exact map of the place. Around 2 minutes of walking later, the nurse and Minato arrived before a white door. Entering inside, Minato saw 3 beds with his 3 students. On the left side, the one closest to the door was Kakashi, who had a book in his hand. It was a book called Ika Ika Paradise. Kakashi is reading Master Jiraiya's book? Minato thought, his mind completely befuddled before his gaze went to the next bed. Nowhere Rin was laid on the bed and was eating an apple. However, the scene, which should have been normal, was clearly not. Her teeth had been elongated and looked like that of a feral beast, whilst her eyes had the same brown color as before. Her black pupil had become feline-like. And finally, the boy on the last bed. Yo, Minato-senpai, were you worried about me? I knew you loved me, Minato-senpai. And his good mood disappeared just like that. Chapter 87. Looking at the book in his hand, Kazuo felt like throwing it in the garbage bin almost instantly. Sigh. Releasing a barely audible sigh, Kazuo decided that opening the book wouldn't hurt. The sound of pages flipping soon intensified as 2 people got fully immersed in reading the books. Fuck, this shit's actually good? Kazuo thought as he put down the book and made a discreet tiger hand seal, sealing it away into his wrist guards that he had already put back on. It was the next day that a medical ninja came inside the room whilst holding a couple of papers in her hands. You are all free to go, you just need to sign these papers. The medical ninja said as she handed one paper sheet to Kazuo, Kakashi, and Rin. After signing it and completing the discharge procedures quickly, the 3 of them were finally free from the hellish room that was, in Kazuo's opinion, depression-worthy. Exiting out of the front gate of the hospital, Kazuo, Kakashi, and Rin were met with Obito Uchiha, Kushina Uzumaki, and Minato Namikaze waiting for them. Yo, senpai! Kazuo said whilst a large grin grew on his face. Hey, Kazuo, Minato replied awkwardly as usual. Keep all of my emotions in check. Kazuo thought as his gaze remained on Kushina for just a slight second longer than on the 2 others. You all want to have some ramen? I'm sure you were tired of the hospital food. Kushina immediately offered as she came and gave Rin a large hug. Sure, that sounds great. Minato-senpai is paying, right? Kazuo said as he brought his arms to the back of his head, clearly forming a carefree image of himself. This should be better than acting shy, considering that I already know them for a while now. Kazuo thought as he started walking ahead of the group towards Ikiarku Ramen. What do you mean I'm paying? Minato said almost immediately. However, the rest had already started walking away, leaving the poor man alone to simply shake his head at his wallet's incoming demise. I guess I can bear it for 1 meal, right? Minato said that the more he thought about it, the more he felt a gut-wrenching pain at imaging the stacked-up plates next to Kushina. Minutes later, the group of 6 arrived at Ikiarku Ramen. Thankfully, the place was empty, otherwise there wouldn't have been enough room for all of them. After everyone ordered and had their fill, chattering amongst themselves for around half an hour, the group decided it was time to head off. Well, I'll be heading back home, Kazuo said as he got ready to split off from the group. Only to be stopped a moment later by Minato grabbing his shoulder. I think we should have that talk first, Minato said, his eyes much colder than before. Sigh. Releasing an inward sigh, Kazuo gave a nod of his head and followed the group of 5 toward Minato's house. Once inside, the man merely made a single hand seal before the entire walls of the house lit up in hundreds of Fuinjutsu seals. A silent seal? No. It should be much more than that, considering the complexity and scale of the seals. Kazuo wondered aloud as he looked at the shimmering seals on the walls, which were quickly fading away. It's a privacy seal, though it's much more advanced than the ones usually used in the commander tents in the front lines, Minato replied before walking toward the living room, the rest of them following him before sitting down on the couches around the low wooden table. So we all have something to share, don't we? Minato said before his eyes, which were wandering around the team's 7 members, got focused on Kazuo. How about you start, Kazuo? Do I have to tell this in front of Kushina-san? Kazuo asked, his voice clearly losing its casual tone. You can consider her as a member of Team 7 to some extent. Though I won't force you, Minato replied as he gave Kazuo the choice. Kazuo took a moment before shaking his head. It's fine. So you're curious about the jutsu that I used? Kakashi most likely told you about them, right? Kazuo questioned first instead of answering the question. Minato didn't give a vocal reply, merely giving a nod of his head. It's a Kekka Genkai of sorts, Kazuo said after a moment of thought, his words resonating around the room. For a moment, Minato's eyes widened slightly. This had been on the list of possibilities, however the chance of it being a Kekkai Genkai had been so low that he hadn't considered it as a valid thought process. This would check out a lot of Kazuo's strangeness both in the war and outside of it. Minato had already noticed how fake Kazuo's behavior was, though it had gotten harder and harder to notice when he was faking it and when he was not as the days went by. He certainly had a talent for acting. Kazuo didn't wait for another question, merely making a single tiger hand seal and unsealing a bunch of paper sheets and placing them onto the table. Grabbing one of the white paper sheets with his index and middle finger, Kazuo injected his chakra into it. Immediately the paper started folding on itself and changing color. It didn't take longer than a split second for it to turn from a white sheet of paper into what looked like a completely metallic shuriken. I can manipulate paper. I can make it change its color as well as shape and harden it to levels similar to steel, Kazuo said before putting the paper shuriken on the table. It made a sound as if it truly was made of steel instead of soft paper. I see. Well then you don't need to explain any further than that, Minato replied. I don't? Kazuo questioned. No, a Kekka Genkai is something extremely personal. Only the Hokage has the right to command you to tell him everything about it, Minato replied before his gaze turned toward his next student. Obito Uchiha. Chapter 88, Minato's gaze turned toward Obito Uchiha, a student who he had already thought to be dead. Well then Obito, whilst I can keep Kazuo's Kekka Genkai a secret, everything that you are about to tell me will be reported to the Hokage as well as Fugaku, your clan leader, Minato said as he motioned with his head for Obito to start. Obito gave a slight nod in understanding before he released a long-winded sigh. I don't mind, Minato-sensei, Obito first said before taking another deep breath and continuing. When I was crushed by the boulder, I lost consciousness, and when I woke up, I was inside of a completely sealed cave, Obito said. It was as he tried to say the next words that his chest thumped with unimaginable pain. It was as if his heart was being torn apart, as if someone had directly clutched his blood-pumping organ and was squeezing it. Cough cough. Obito almost fell down, however Kakashi quickly grabbed him by the shoulders and held him in place. What's wrong? Minato questioned immediately, however before he could get up to help, Obito raised a hand, his condition already stabilizing. Once he straightened himself back up, Obito had a twitching smile on his face. Though it resembled a smile, it was clear that it was a sarcastic one at best. Seems like the man who saved me has placed some precautions to stop me from saying anything, Minato-sensei. For a moment, Minato didn't reply, only giving a nod of his head a brief moment later. I guess you will have to go through a Yamanaka examination then. If that doesn't work, then I'll try to find a way to remove whatever has been done to you, Minato replied before a thought went through his head. What did you feel just now? Obito pointed to the left side of his chest. It felt like my heart was being squeezed. Heart being squeezed? That doesn't seem like Jinjutsu, it feels more like a seal. Minato thought quickly before getting up from his seating position and walking to Obito. Lay down and remove your jacket, Minato practically ordered. Obito followed the order without a second thought as he quickly laid down on the couch and removed the jacket, revealing his chest, which was clearly different from a normal person's. The main difference is the strange two-colored skin. It's quite miraculous how they were able to heal you up and even regenerate your lost limbs. What did the medical ninja say about it? Minato questioned, even though he was not privy to everything about his students. Nothing. The part that has been replaced looked completely normal. The medical ninja didn't even notice any difference, and so they didn't do any extensive checks on it, Obito replied, causing Minato to release a hum in thought. Minato placed his left hand on Obito's chest before releasing a small wave of chakra that went through Obito's entire body. A moment later, he said, "There's a seal placed on your heart." "A seal on my heart?" Obito immediately raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Isn't that dangerous?" "No, should we even send him to the Yamanaka-sensei? They could trigger the seal and cause Obito's death." Kazuo interjected at this moment. Rin, Kakashi, and Kushina, who heard Kazuo's words that voiced out their own thoughts, immediately changed their expression to a grimacing one. They knew that Obito had to go through a Yamanaka examination, whether they liked it or not. It would have been possible to not do it if Minato were the Hokage, however he wasn't yet. "Can you remove it, Minato?" Kushina asked, her voice low. Minato shook his head. "Maybe you could, Kushina, however even then we would need to have an expert medical ninja on hand so that we could safely open up his chest, and the only one capable enough would be Lady Tsunade, however she has already left the village," Minato replied before handing Obito his jack back. "Alright, at this moment all that we can hope for is that the Yamanaka examination doesn't trigger the seal, however I'll also try and see if Lord Hokage can make an exception," Minato said before sitting back down onto the couch opposite of Obito. His eyes turned toward Rin, the last person who he was planning to talk to. "I'll give you the same option as I did to Obito, Rin. You can choose to not have the others around when we talk about the changes that are occurring to you." Minato asked as he looked at Rin. "I don't mind, Sensei," Rin answered. "It's not like it's a secret either way," Kazuo said, barely holding back a scoff. "Not a secret?" Kushina turned at his words. "I mean, with all due respect, Minato-sensei, Kushina-san, I've fought a Jinchuriki before and he showed quite a lot of similarities with what Rin is going through right now, as well as the fact that I already saw the large seal on Rin's body when we rescued her. However, considering that she doesn't have a seal on her body right now, I'd guess that either the previous tailed beast was removed from her body, which would lead to certain death, or that the seal has been further repaired by you too," Kazuo said before taking a moment to gather his breath. "If it is the first option, then she entered a state of pseudo-death and was then revived with medical ninjutsu and was implanted with the chakra of another tailed beast, which leaves only the 9 tails. The 9 tails can only be sealed into Uzumaki, and Kushina-san is an Uzumaki. This would also explain the physical changes that she has gone through, which normal Jinchuriki don't go through without releasing the tailed beast's chakra," Kazuo said before stopping for a moment and raising his eyebrow as he looked at the group before him. "Am I right?" A slight smile had unknowingly appeared on his expression. Kushina, Kakashi, Obito, and Rin looked flabbergasted as they practically had their mouths hanging, whilst Minato's eyes were clearly widened as he looked at Kazuo. Chapter 89. It didn't take long for the group to gather their wits again. Minato nodded his head slowly, and a twitching smile appeared on his face. "Seems like I underestimate you, Kazuo. I guess being chosen as an assistant of Inara really wasn't an accident," Minato said before releasing a soft sigh. "You mean that Rin is now a Jinchuriki of the 9 tails?" Kakashi took this moment to ask as he turned to face Minato. It was Kushina, however, that responded to his question. "No, she's more like a chakra battery. She doesn't have any of the 9 tails consciousness and only some remnant of its chakra. However, if the sealing isn't reinforced soon, then that could change." "That could change?" Obito questioned as he raised an eyebrow. "That's right, the chakra could develop the 9 tails consciousness if it becomes more and more integrated with Rin's body. After that happens, then that chakra will be able to regenerate, and thus Rin herself would become a sort of tailed beast instead of the vessel of one. Now there are 2 options that we can take, though one of them is rapidly fading away," Minato responded as he pointed toward Rin. Kazuo released a hum as he nodded his head slowly. The process of fusion between the 2 different chakras has already progressed quite a bit if we look at the fact that Rin has already produced physical changes. "That's right, in fact, we might already be too late, so sealing the chakra away completely might already not be an option for us." "Then what's the second option, Sensei?" Rin questioned as she brought her hands together. It was clear how stressed the young kunoichi was from how much her hands were shaking. "It's to create an entirely new seal that seals the remaining portion of the unfused 9-tailed chakra and then allows for it to slowly be integrated into your chakra system. This will likely cause quite a lot of side effects, however." Silence engulfed the room once more at Minato's words. This is useful. I guess you really weren't useless after all, Rinchan. Kazuo thought as his mind quickly went back to his plan of devouring the nine-tailed flesh during the nine-tailed rampage on the leaf. The side effects would probably be that she won't be able to control her chakra as effectively anymore and would be prone to increased emotional reactions and going on rampages? Kazuo questioned as he rubbed his chin with his left hand. That's right, it would essentially make it so that Rin would have to start training her chakra control and jutsu that she has currently mastered from the start once again. Would that affect the jutsu that I gain from the system? Probably not, but that would mean that I would lose all the other jutsu that I learned myself, including the paper jutsu that I created on my own. And then it's likely that that jutsu would be much harder to master or learn again as well, considering the volatile nature of tailed beast chakra. Kazuo thought as he quickly analyzed the possible repercussions of fusing tailed beast chakra into your own chakra system. Minato stood silent for a moment as he gathered his thoughts. It, however, is the only option we have right now. But I'll tell you all of the possible side effects that I can think of first. Rin gave a shallow nod of her head. Cold sweat had already covered her back, however her eyes showed a fierce determination. Loss of chakra control and all jutsu mastered until now. Loss of reproduction abilities, though we would have to do medical exams to confirm it. A possible significant reduction is emotional control, and finally, your body itself will likely change. This could range from small physical changes like your teeth turning into sharp fangs and your eyes resembling those of a fox's, all the way up to your bone structure or even growing a foxtail in extreme cases. Those are all of the possible side effects that I can think of, Minato said before taking a deep breath. That's quite a lot, and though the side effect of growing fox limbs or appendages doesn't seem that bad at first, it's actually one of the worst ones. It would completely change your body's balance and center of mass, which will cause even the loss of your taijutsu, shuriken jutsu, and bukijutsu skills. Kazuo thought before releasing an inward sigh. The more he thought about it, the more he hated the fact that he hadn't been simply transmigrated into the body of a Uzumaki or even Uzumaki Naruto's body. I see. Well, we don't really have any other options, Minato-sensei, and even if all of those effects turn into a reality, I won't give up. Let's do this, Rin said as she gave a small nod, her expression showing a twitching smile that clearly carried hidden sadness. However, it was all overshadowed by her overwhelming determination. Someone who was under Minato Namake's tutelage and then went ahead and sacrificed himself for the village without a second thought really isn't normal. Anyone would choose this option since it's their only way to live. However, to show such determination in the face of what could be career-ending side effects isn't something anyone can do. I guess I underestimated you, Noara Rin. You were more useful than Sakura after all, Kazuo thought as he showed a soft smile on his expression. That's the way, Rinchan. You don't have to worry about anything. Kakashi, Obito and I will be around to help you throughout everything, Kazuo said as his soft smile turned into a cheesy one as he got closer to the young girl and gave her a side hug. His face then turned toward Obito Uchiha. For a moment Obito didn't react, and in the next moment, he quickly came closer and gave Rin a hug himself. Chapter 90, Good. I need your emotional attachment with Rin to not deteriorate. It's a valuable weakness, Kazuo thought as he parted ways with the young girl and sat back down on the couch. Kakashi meanwhile remained seated, though he had shifted his position closer to the young girl. Minato and Kushina meanwhile merely showed soft smiles as they looked at the group of young ninjas. After Obito and Rin parted, Minato released a soft humming sound before speaking up. Alright, well then, Kushina and I will start constructing the seal as soon as possible. We were actually already designing a seal similar to this one, so it won't take long at all, as all we have to do is change some small parts of the seal. It should be reworked in less than 10 hours. You should stay here, Rin, so that we can do the sealing process immediately after. Alright, Sensei, Rin replied, her voice much more enthusiastic compared to a few moments ago. Minato then turned toward Option and without a single hand seal, he created a shadow clone. You go with the shadow clone to the Hokage first and then to the Uchiha clan grounds, all right, Obito? Yes, Sensei. With those words and a nod from Obito, the shadow clone and he vanished in a flash as they teleported away using the flying right Jin jutsu. Well, then I guess I should be heading off as well now. You coming with me for some ramen, Kakashi? Kazuo questioned as he rose from the couch. No, I'll be staying here with Rin, Kakashi replied with a soft shake of his head. The Hyuga clan's branch patriarch told me that he wishes to meet you, Kazuo, Minato said as Kazuo started heading away. Kazuo turned his head in confusion before he quickly remembered. Ah, yes, I was expecting it, though not this soon. You're planning on forming a connection with the Hyuga? Minato questioned, though it was clear that he wasn't ordering for an answer. Kazuo gave a soft nod. As you know, I'm not into that great of a position inside the village right now, Minato-sensei. You should already be aware that the root isn't on the best of terms with me, and whilst you can serve as a shield for me, that burden will only grow bigger until Danzo himself decides to take matters into his own hands. By having the Hyuga backing me, then it should be easier both on me and you, senpai. Kazuo replied. Alright, if you face anything problematic, however, just tell me and I'll do my best, Kazuo, Minato replied with a serious tone before turning around and heading toward his office in another room of the house. His trust has already grown enough, and with me having shown my Kekka Genkai, it has practically solidified already. Kazuo thought as his lips curled even further upwards. Good, it's all starting to fall in place. With those thoughts, Kazuo exited Minato's and Kushina's house and started heading towards his next destination. At first, he had thought of directly heading towards his home, however, with Minato informing him, he headed toward the Hyuga branch clan district. They informed Minato about them planning to form a connection with me, and as such they have declared that they don't actually want to make an enemy out of Minato by bringing me into their circle of influence, and considering that Minato didn't stop me, then that means he had a decent relationship with the Hyugas. Kazuo thought as he nodded to his own analysis. Kazuo decided that he wouldn't be using body flicker this time around and walked through the village's streets in broad daylight. It seemed like his reputation had only grown, and the villagers had started to recognize him pretty easily as they murmured and whispered with each other as they saw him. Kazuo, however, didn't shy away at all as his expression changed into a bright smile, giving a large wave to whoever looked at him. It was only moments later that a small child ran to him, almost stumbling onto the ground as the small kid held something behind her back. Mr. Kazuo stopped as he turned to face the small girl. Lowering himself, Kazuo placed a hand on her head and ruffled her hair slightly whilst showing what could only be called a holy smile. Hello there! The sight seemed to radiate warmness, and the surrounding villagers who had recognized Kazuo stopped what they were doing and looked at the duo. A war veteran who had fought for all of them and the village itself, crouching and smiling at the small child on the road. All of these combined together to only further raise Kazuo's reputation in their eyes. The small kid brought his hands forward, showing what she had been hiding. It was a couple of hand-picked dandelions. Are these for me? The child, obviously shy, simply gave a nod of her head, her entire face already red. They're beautiful, thank you. I'll make sure to cherish them. Now go back to your daddy, he seems to be waiting for you. Kazuo replied with a soft smile as he pointed to what looked like the child's father. Thank you for saving my dad. The child muttered as she gave Kazuo a bright smile and then ran off back towards her father. It's my duty, seeing the smiles of children like you only reaffirms my will, Kazuo said, his voice louder than what would be necessary, though no one seemed to detect this as all the surrounding villagers heard him. Their faces changed to smiles almost immediately as they turned to continue the work they had left. Kazuo continued walking through the streets until he arrived at the Hyuga compound almost half an hour later. Looking at the large compound from the outside was truly a majestic sight. It showcased the real might of Konoha's strongest clan after the founding Uchiha and Senju clans. At the front of the compound stood a large wooden gate that was made in what Kazuo could only think of as a traditional Japanese style. There were 2 guards wearing Konoha headbands at the front gate. Main branch members usually don't wear their Konoha headbands on their head, they're most likely branch members hiding the cursed seal on their forehead. Kazuo thought as he walked toward the 2. Halt! What business do you have with the Hyuga clan? One of the guards almost shouted as he intercepted Kazuo. I was invited by the branch patriarch of the Hyuga clan. If you could please inform him of my arrival. My name's Kazuo, a Chunin under Namake's Minato. Kazuo announced. Chapter 91. I was invited by the branch patriarch of the Hyuga clan if you could please inform him of my arrival. My name is Kazuo, a Chunin under Jonin Minato Namikaze. The Hyuga guard didn't change his stoic expression and merely gave a nod before turning toward the other guard who was at the back still and telling him to go inform the patriarch. After doing so, the guard went back to his post by the door, though it was clear that he was still on guard against Kazuo. Stuck-up fuckers, the saying that they have a stick up their ass really is true. Kazuo thought as he clearly noticed how much a mere guard of the clan was looking down on him. Kazuo knew for a fact that he was already more famous in the village than 90% of the Leaf Ninjas, however the guard didn't even give him the slightest bit of acknowledgement, at least not looking so on guard against him. It took almost half an hour before the guard came back. The branch head has allowed you to meet him, the man said before clearing the way so that Kazuo could head in. After Kazuo headed into the almost giant clan district, the guard showed him the way toward the biggest building on the outskirts of the clan grounds. This is the place, please head in, the man said as he gave a shallow bow and moved a few steps back to allow Kazuo to head into the building. Just like the gates, every building, especially the one in front of Kazuo, had an ancient Japanese architectural style. Even though it was old, that didn't mean that it wasn't luxurious. In fact, it looked so luxurious that Kazuo wondered if he was entering the home of a land of fire princes. They really do like to show off. I wonder what they use to gather all of these funds. However, do they just use ninja missions? No, even that wouldn't make all of this possible, so they likely have some kind of industry of their own, just like the Yamanaka flowers, a kimchi food. Kazuo thought as he gave a nod and thanks to the guard who had led him here and then headed inside. He was quickly met with a maid who gave him an almost 90-degree bow before softly asking him to follow her. After around 2 minutes of slow-paced walking later, Kazuo arrived in front of a sliding door. Hizashi-sama, Chunin Kazuo has arrived, may he head in? A moment later, Kazuo heard a voice affirming his entry from the other side of the sliding door. So Hizashi and Hayashi have already taken their posts as the Hyuga leaders. They should still have a good relationship as Niji hasn't been born yet, and as such Hizashi doesn't mind the fact that the branch side of the family is discriminated against as much. Kazuo thought as he gave a nod and thanks to the maid and slid the door open. Entering inside, the room was almost completely made of dark oak wood planks, and on the other side of the room, he saw a small table with 2 small pillows of sorts. On the other side of the table sat Hizashi Hyuga, whilst the pillow on Kazuo's side was free, clearly meant for him to sit on. Greetings, Kazuo said as he gave a shallow bow to the man and then walked toward the room and sat down slowly. The man had yet to even return his greeting. Kazuo gave a soft smile as he spoke, his eyes appearing like a calm, serene lake. I'm sorry if my greeting wasn't respectful enough. I'm an orphan and thus was never taught how to properly respect my elders. I hope you can be understanding. It was at this moment when Hizashi slightly shook his head. No, it is quite alright, Kazuo-san, Hizashi spoke as his eyes trailed on Kazuo's body, which sat in a picture-perfect pose. He clearly has learned how to be polite, however, he doesn't want to seem like someone under me. You've raised someone quite shrewd, Minato, Hizashi thought before he opened his mouth. I'm pleased that you've decided to side with us, Kazuo-san. I'm overjoyed as well, to be able to have a meeting such as this with someone of your stature, Kazuo replied almost instantly to his words. I see, Hizashi said before releasing an audible hum. It was at this moment that the maid Kazuo had seen before came back into the room whilst bringing a tea set. After placing the cups and tea on the table, she quickly excused herself before walking away silently. So you really want to play these games, huh, Hizashi? Sure, I can entertain you for now, Kazuo thought as his lips curved slightly upwards. Picking up the tea carefully, he first poured Hizashi a cup before pouring one to himself. It was only when Hizashi started drinking from his cup that Kazuo picked his own to drink. It is exquisite. It's one of our best blends. We usually only take it out for important guests, Hizashi replied with a small nod. I'm pleased to know that I'm seen as such, however I am merely a passing wind, one that couldn't cause a major change. Though I might become a butterfly soon enough, Kazuo said with a slight hum of his own. A butterfly? I wonder if that's the case, Hisashi replied before placing down the cup, causing Kazuo to do the same. I think a butterfly should flock amongst flowers instead of barren wastelands of ash. How about it, Kazuo? Hisashi questioned a few moments later. Kazuo's mind quickly whirred into action at his words. He's asking me to become even closer to the Hyuga clan? Or was this what they were after from the beginning? Marriage into the Hyuga clan would certainly give me quite a lot of benefits, however at the same time it would turn me into an almost sworn enemy of the Uchiha clan. Kazuo thought before releasing an audible soft sigh. If I may be direct, Lord Hisashi, a butterfly doesn't want a tie that holds it down forcefully, a tie that holds even those as high as yourself down. Hisashi released a soft chuckle at his words, causing Kazuo's eyes to widen slightly. I guess Minato's students are as brazen as he is. Kazuo, you won't get the tie that those such as I get, though any progeny will. I see, in that case, I'll accept the offer, Kazuo replied with a soft sigh of relief. I'm glad. Chapter 92. I'm glad, Hisashi uttered as a polite smile showed on his face, but to Kazuo it looked more devilish than actually soft. What the fuck? A Hyuga smiling? Did he catch me in some sort of trap or the like? Kazuo thought as he looked at Hisashi, his eyes slightly widening before his face returned to the same polite expression that he had held since the start of the meeting. In any case, I'll leave everything up to you, Patriarch, Kazuo said as he got up slowly from his seat. Hisashi gave a soft nod in reply as he similarly got up from his seated position and started walking with Kazuo. You will likely get married to someone from the main branch, however even in that case, your children will still get the seal, Hisashi added as the two walked outside of the manor, stopping as they arrived at the perimeter of the branch head's manor. That is quite alright, though I hope you can tell them that they shouldn't be expecting any children for quite a while, at least until I'm in my 20s, Kazuo replied with a small chuckle. Alright, well then we part ways here, Kazuo. I'll send a message for when you're required to come again and meet your bride, Hisashi replied, his face having already switched back to his usual stoic stone-like facade. No problem, until next time, Patriarch Sama, Kazuo replied as he gave the man an almost 90-degree bow, much lower than when he had met him, after all the circumstances had changed completely in a matter of minutes as well. Kazuo had now almost completely joined the Hyuga clan. After he married the woman, he would similarly be given the Hyuga name. Kazuo was quickly given an escort to guide him to the exit of the clan district. Walking through the clan grounds, Kazuo looked around much more carefully. This would be another battlefield that he would be battling in soon enough. Clan politics, though I'll likely be excluded from most if not everything that happens in the clan, I'll still most likely be used as soon as my power and value increases enough. Kazuo thought as he finally passed through the large Japanese gate once more and arrived outside of the Hyuga clan grounds. I'll also have to stop the death of Hisashi Hyuga. My main supporter of sorts at the moment is the branch family. I need to keep them on my side. If I don't have enough support, then those bastards from the main family would probably sell me out for a reward from Danzo. Kazuo thought as he continued walking through the village towards his final destination for the day. A broken-down apartment. Arriving at the apartment only to find his kunai trap launched and his room completely ransacked wasn't a good experience in the least. Sigh. Releasing a frustrated sigh, Kazuo simply walked toward his even more broken-down bed and lay down. Thankfully the cushion was thick enough that the wood that had pierced into the mattress hadn't managed to create any discomfort to his back. Closing his eyes, Kazuo's hands clenched. He felt like killing someone. Hours passed and soon enough it was a new day. Kazuo as always woke up early and completed his daily exercise whilst increasing the pressure from the seals slightly. Around an hour and a half later, after he completed his daily morning routine, Kazuo headed out of the apartment. As soon as he did, he was met with a new face. You bastard, what did you do to the apartment? An old man with a hunched back stood in front of him, screaming his ears off. Kazuo simply stared at the man as he continued screaming for what felt like an hour. Are you done? Kazuo asked as he lowered himself so that he could whisper in the man's ear. Even though Kazuo was 13, he was abnormally large for a leaf shinobi. His stature already put him on the list of the tallest shinobi that the leaf had already produced. For a moment, The old man considered continuing his rant, however those thoughts were interrupted almost immediately by a cold metallic object pressing against his neck. "Do you think I wouldn't know if it was you who did this to the apartment?" Kazuo asked, his voice sounding so cold that it made the old man feel as if he had been thrown into the cold ocean during the winter. "How?" the man uttered as his body started shaking as if it were a leaf in the wind. "You do know who I am, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have tried this. You knew who I was and thought that I was loaded and a pushover, right? You fucking piece of shit," Kazuo said and pressed the kunai against the old man's throat even harder. "I'm sorry, please forgive me," the old man stuttered out, his pants already changing color as the man pissed himself. Sigh. It was at this moment that Kazuo released a sigh and pushed the old man away, causing him to drop on the floor shaking. "Fix the room by tomorrow morning, a new bed and everything, or just give me a different well-maintained room. I don't care how you do it," Kazuo said before he disappeared in an instant, only leaving a couple of tree leaves in his wake. It was only seconds later that he reappeared again, hundreds of meters away, already in an entirely different district of the Hidden Leaf. He now stood in front of his sensei's house. He could already hear the sound of boiling water from the inside, as well as Kushina practically screaming about something. "Guess the ceiling went well," Kazuo muttered as he knocked on the door. Chapter 93. It was at this moment that he heard the familiar notification sound from the system inside his mind. Ding! User has completed mission, thwart Madara Uchiha's plans. Partial success, rewards will be lowered. Recalculating rewards. Rewards have been calculated. System has changed rewards due to hidden task being accomplished. User has gained 3% bloodline activation. User has gained a random chakra nature. Ding! User has gained water chakra release. Kazuo stopped, his body frozen as he looked at the notifications that kept piling up one after another in front of his eyes. He, however, wasn't focused on the rewards at all. "I fucking knew it wasn't going to be that easy with that old fucker," Kazuo thought as he stared at a single notification he had gotten from his system. Partial success. That means that Madara still has plans. Maybe a full success would have been killing Madara or stopping Rin's pseudo-death, though it's more probable to be the first guess. Meaning either Obito will get caught and manipulated again, or Madara will simply select another Uchiha. Kazuo thought as he released a long-winded sigh. Finally, his eyes turned toward his rewards. User bloodline has reached 8%. User has completed another mission. Survive the Curie mission. User has gained and released chakra nature. 2 chakra natures as well as a 3% bloodline increase. Unfortunately, it's not the chakra nature that I would have preferred, Kazuo thought as he felt like releasing another sigh of disappointment. He had wanted earth and lightning nature. If those two had been given by the system, then he would have likely been able to create his second Kekka Jinkai, the explosion release. Unfortunately, he had been given water and Ein release, 2 chakra natures that he rarely if ever used jutsu from. I at least have some water jutsu. I don't have any Ein release jutsu at all, Kazuo thought in annoyance before quickly swiping the notifications away. It was at this moment that the door in front of him opened. It was Kushina Uzumaki. "What are you standing there for? Come inside, Kazuo." Kushina immediately berated him as soon as she saw him. "She sensed my chakra," Kazuo thought as he gave a sheepish nod in return. Entering inside, he quickly saw Obito, Kakashi, Rin, and Minato sitting around the sofa in the living room. "Hey guys," Kazuo said as he gave the four a wave of his hand. "So you're now fully part of our team, Kazuo," Obito said, his voice clearly excited, so different from how it had been yesterday. "Seems like he's back to his usual self," Kazuo thought as he gave a soft nod and sat down next to Kakashi. "Yeah, it's been a while now. Either way, seems like the ceiling was a success," Kazuo said as he turned to stare at Rin Noera. She clearly looked different. Her pupils were feline-like and her front teeth had almost fully become sharp fangs. Thankfully there didn't seem to be any more side effects. "Yeah, but as Minato-sensei said, I'll have to start my chakra training from the beginning. Rin replied with an excited voice. I see, good luck then Rin-chan, Kazuo replied with a soft smile. At his words, Kazuo clearly felt Obito turn to stare at him in annoyance. Chuckle. Kazuo heard Minato release a soft chuckle as he stared at Obito. Anyway, I was planning to ask for your help, Minato-sensei. At his words, Minato turned toward Kazuo and raised an eyebrow. With? I've wanted to learn sealing for a while now, it would help me greatly with my Kekka Genkai, Kazuo replied as he turned to stare at his sensei. Sure, I can help you out, Kazuo, Minato replied with a nod and a soft smile of his own before he got up from the sofa and headed to his office. A few minutes later he returned with a pile of papers and an ink pen. The first thing you need to do is get good at calligraphy, it's the most essential part of sealing, Minato said before pushing the stack of papers and the pen to Kazuo as well as a small blue book. Sealing for a dumbass. Am I a dumbass, sensei? Kazuo asked almost immediately as soon as he saw the title. No, that's just the name the author used. You can say that I'm a dumbass as well since that's the book I used at the beginning as well. It's an Uzumaki book that was made for outsiders. Minato replied with a soft chuckle. You can ask me for help whenever you want as well, Kazuo. Kushina interjected at this moment as Kazuo opened the sealing book. Lifting his head, Kazuo gave a nod to Kushina before turning his attention back to the book. Minutes turned into hours as Kazuo got completely immersed in the sealing book, all the sounds around him becoming dull as he ignored them. It was only 3 hours later that Kazuo lifted his head. I don't understand anything. Huh? Obito subconsciously said as he turned toward Kazuo. Nothing at all? Minato raised an eyebrow as he turned to look at Kazuo. Nothing at all, Kazuo replied, his voice clearly tinged with annoyance as he dropped the book onto the table and leaned back before releasing a long sigh. Don't be too disappointed, Kazuo, sealing just isn't for everyone, Minato said in what Kazuo could clearly infer as a comforting voice. It doesn't matter, I wasn't planning on mastering sealing jutsu, I just wanted to learn some of the basic seals and I can just memorize those, Kazuo said as he turned toward Minato and asked. Is it possible to learn the explosion tag and possibly the storage seal without actually learning the basics of how seals work? It is though you won't be able to create high-tier explosion tags or storage seals, but at least basic ones should be possible. Alright then, I want to learn that, Minato-sensei, can you teach me? I'll teach you, Kushina said as she walked out of the kitchen and sat next to Kazuo before quickly grabbing the ink pen and drawing a set of kanji characters. This is normal ink instead of sealing ink, so it should be fine as long as you don't inject chakra into it. Practice writing these kanji until you can replicate them perfectly. Alright, thanks, Kazuo replied as he was once more focused, dulling every sound around him and only focusing on writing the kanji on the paper in front of him. He sure works hard, unlike someone, Kakashi said dully as stared at Kazuo. I'm shocked, honestly. I thought he would master sealing in one go just like he did the other jutsu. Rin said absently as she gazed at Kazuo, who was scribbling characters on the paper. What do you guys mean? Obito questioned as he turned to stare at the two. Kazuo's a genius, he surpasses me, Kakashi replied. Huh, no way. I have to compete with another Kakashi, what have I done wrong in this life? Obito practically screamed as he stood up. Chapter 94, So how did the meeting with the Hyuga turn out? Minato asked as he took a ramen bowl that Kushina had prepared into his hands. Kazuo himself was slurping down the noodles before stopping and turning toward Minato. Oh right, I almost forgot to tell you, Minato-sensei. His voice was clearly fake as he said in excitement. What did this guy do? Minato immediately thought as his posture straightened whilst looking at Kazuo. A bad premotion already in his mind. Kazuo just gave him what one would call a devilish smile before turning to face everyone and saying in a happy voice. I invite everyone to my wedding, though I don't know the date exactly yet. It was like a bomb that had detonated right in the middle of the living room. The bowl in Minato's and Kushina's hands fell and immediately shattered. What? Obito and Rin practically screamed whilst Kakashi's eyes had significantly widened. Wedding! Obito stuttered as he looked at Kazuo with his mouth hanging open. Yeah, things turned that way, so I'm going to finally get a surname soon. Kazuo Hyuga, sounds nice, right? What do you mean sounds right? You're too young. Kushina immediately said as she walked to Kazuo and practically shook his organs out. Kazuo, this isn't a joke, right? Kushina stopped shaking him angrily for a moment. No, and can you stop shaking me, Kushina-san? I feel like I'm going to die. At his words, Kushina removed her hands, however her gaze was anything but calm. Was this your decision or were you coerced, Kazuo? Minato asked, his voice growing colder as he looked at his student. It was my decision, sensei, and I don't plan on turning back against it. It's another way for me to get a safer position in the Hidden Leaf. Of course, even with me becoming an honorary Hyuga, I'm still not going to be perfectly safe, but it'll be much easier. At the same time, I added some conditions to the deal. Kazuo said as he released a sigh. I could have protected you just fine, Kazuo, Minato replied, his voice losing its tension and instead growing almost resigned. You could, Minato-sensei, however I don't want to rely on you too much. I've already leached off of you enough as it is, Kazuo replied, his tone of voice sounding apologetic. Of course, you're going to protect me, damn it. Kazuo thought to himself as he stared at Minato, his facial expression contorted so that he would give out a feeble and pity-worthy look. Hearing his words, Minato released a sigh of relief. I'm close enough with the Hyuga Patriarch, I'll make sure that they treat you well, Minato replied before asking. So who's going to be your partner? At Minato's question, everyone's ears perked up. I don't know. It felt like a heavy weight slammed onto their heads once more. You don't? Obito almost screamed again in shock. No, though Hizashi-san told me that it will likely be someone from the main Hyuga branch. That's good, Minato replied as he gave a nod. Anyway, help me out with this part, Kushina-sensei. Kushina didn't reply for a few moments before turning to look at what part of the seal was confusing Kazuo. A kid getting married before me. Kushina thought as she felt like crying tears of blood. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, inside a completely sealed cave. The insides were completely dark with no light to be found anywhere. It gave off a completely eerie feeling, even the smell inside could only be understood as the smell of decay and death. Inside this sealed underground cave was a small wooden bed as well as what looked like a large wooden chair with huge tubes coming out from behind it. Sitting on this large wooden chair that almost resembled a throne was an old man with spiky long white hair. What do you plan to do now? A voice was heard from the other side of the cave. It was a human-like being, however when looked at from a closer distance, it was anything but human. Half of its body was completely white with green hair and a yellowish-green eye, whilst the other half was completely black with the same green hair, however its eye was completely round with a dark yellow color. The plan doesn't change much, we only have to guide Nagato better. The old man said, his voice deep and raspy, making it feel as if the old man was on the verge of death. The tubes behind him weren't actually connected to the chair he was sitting on. They were connected to him instead, creating a horrific image. I see, well then I guess the plan continues. The human-like monster replied. Bring him to me by tomorrow, I'll plant a genjutsu on him. You know how to turn him toward the darkness yourself, Setsu. Of course, Madara-sama. That being said, before its figure slowly disappeared as it merged with the cave wall behind it. The old man was Madara Uchiha, the greatest Uchiha to ever grace the earth that shinobi walked on. A man who had been so powerful once upon a time that he had been called a god. He, however, had lost almost all of his strength and now relied only on these tubes connected to his body to maintain the feeble flame that had become his life. Kazuo, Madara thought, his only eye, a three-tomo Sharingan starting to whirl for the first time in what felt like years. The person in the shinobi god's thoughts, however, was currently being berated and beaten up by a red-haired woman whilst thinking whether he should give said woman an existential crisis. Chapter 95, Days continued to flow by, time unstopping though time was experienced differently by everyone. Some who were stuck in the academy classroom felt like it was going at a crawl, whilst others who were having fun with their friends on the streets of the Hidden Leaf felt that it was going past them in a flash. For a special person, time was repeated over and over. Huff huff. Releasing harsh breath, Kazuo felt like he was suffocating. 216 times. Kazuo thought to himself as his body moved towards the left as soon as he opened his eyes. The bed where he had been sleeping until now was immediately pierced by a dozen kunai with explosion tags covering them completely. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Kazuo continued spouting profanities in his mind as he formed hand seals at immense speeds. Water style, enhanced severing water wave, Kazuo muttered as what looked like a high-speed torrent of water escaped from his mouth, severing everything in its path, and completely destroying the small green tent he was in. Kazuo didn't stop, however, as he quickly made a shadow clone without using a single hand seal. The shadow clone didn't stay still for a moment as it immediately summoned a flurry of white paper sheets which quickly formed two wings on his back. Using them, it quickly launched itself up into the air and outside of the tent, which was already falling in and around Kazuo, who was still inside. It was at this moment that Kazuo's chakra quickly changed path and went through a predetermined motion, allowing him to use another jutsu. Earth style, hiding like a mole jutsu. Kazuo's body quickly disappeared underground and started swimming through the ground at high speeds. Faster, faster. Kazuo thought to himself as he pushed more and more chakra into the earth around him, making it grow even softer and allowing him to go through the ground even faster. Why the fuck did I have to meet that guy? Why is he after me in the first place? Kazuo thought to himself as he felt like cursing the Sage of Six Paths to death. Above ground, hundreds of meters away from Kazuo, who was still trying his best to run away, and in the middle of a camp that was currently on fire, two people stood, or rather one stood on the ground whilst the other floated on the air with the use of two paper angelic wings. Chunin Kazuo, having a bounty of 60 million ryo. The man standing on the ground said, his face contorted into a grin as he looked at Kazuo. Kakuzu, the man who ran with his tail between his legs like a little wimpy bitch as soon as he saw the first Hokage. Kazuo offered in return as a reply to the man. Kakuzu didn't respond with words in return. The man simply was engulfed by hundreds of what looked like human hair strands. Four masked monsters made of human hair appeared next to him almost instantly. I'll make sure to only leave your head intact. Kakuzu offered as his body's color changed slightly in color, becoming more metallic-like. I don't think you can even catch me. Kazuo offered in return before showing a smirk. I could have escaped whenever I wanted, but I just can't do it, Kazuo said as he released a large sigh as if he was pained by the entire scenario in front of him. I just can't stand not killing such an unsightly hairy bastard such as yourself. Kakuzu didn't let him say another word as the four masked monsters immediately jumped toward Kazuo's location. Their mouths opened wide and released four different elemental jutsu. Water, lightning, wind, and fire. Kazuo's shadow clone, however, simply raised an eyebrow as he brought his wings together as if to protect himself. At that moment, the paper at the front of the wings shined in an azure blue color as hundreds of seals were activated. Phew, and Kazuo muttered as the four elemental jutsu were sucked into the papers. I had to waste this shit for you. Kazuo thought as he spread his wings wide once more. Release. In an instant, all four elemental jutsu that had been sealed were released and thrown back toward the masked monsters. I had to promise Kushina 4 months of free ramen. Do you know how much money I wasted for this shit? Kazuo thought to himself as he immediately launched himself toward the four masked monsters. His speed was immense as he appeared next to the monsters who had dodged the rebounded elemental jutsu almost instantly. Kai bitch. Kazuo said as all the papers that made up his wings lit up at once. It wasn't just the papers, even he himself, the shadow clone, lit up. Bong! With a sound that reverberated for kilometers, the clone and the paper tags exploded, completely incinerating and vanquishing the paper monsters. Kakuzu was left alone in the field. He hadn't been caught by the explosion, however his expression was far from good. In a deep gravelly voice, the man announced to himself as he grabbed 3 dead bodies around him. I'll get your heart if it's the last thing I do. Kakuzu said as he pierced the three-leaf shinobi's chests and stole their hearts, implanting them inside his own body. Meanwhile, Kazuo, who was running away still, now being more than 100 kilometers away, finally stopped. "Take that, you fucker," Kazuo thought as he immediately started making hand seals, creating 2 more shadow clones. "Make more explosion seals," Kazuo ordered as he sat down in a meditative pose, trying to regain any amount of chakra he could. "Why is my luck so fucking trashy?" Kazuo thought as he remembered how all this shit had started. One day ago inside the Hidden Leaf Village. This will be used as your Jonin promotion exam. Chunin Kazuo. Chapter 96. One day ago inside the Hidden Leaf Village. This will be used as your Jonin promotion exam. Chunin Kazuo. Minato said as he looked at Kazuo, who was currently seated on the sofa inside Minato's and Kushina's home. Kazuo didn't respond verbally, merely using a nod in acknowledgement. Minato didn't say anything further and merely handed him the purple mission scroll. An A-rank mission. Kazuo thought as he quickly unfurled the scroll and read through it. Assassination of Kazuo Iza, a member of the rebellious party of the daimyo court. Kazuo thought as he read it. Shouldn't be too hard with my paper illusion and paper clones, a long-distance detonation, and it should be done. Kazuo thought as he gave a nod to himself before closing the scroll once more and torching it with a small fire seal-less jutsu. Then I'll be heading out. The team should be waiting for me at the village gates in around 20 minutes, Kazuo said as he got up from the sofa. All right, be careful out there, Minato said in response. Don't worry too much, Minato-sensei, I'm quite strong, Kazuo replied with a small chuckle as he walked toward the front door, stopping only a moment when he arrived there. Turning around, he raised his lips slightly as he said, "The next Hokage, eh?" Minato gave a small chuckle before nodding. Kazuo returned the nod before opening the front door and heading outside. Minato is in the process of being selected for the next Hokage position. Hiruzen has already announced that he would be resigning from his position. At the same time, this indicates that the next large plot is close. Kazuo thought as he used Shunshin continuously to head toward the village gates. He had already stored everything he needed for a mission in his wristband so that he could be prepared for an emergency mission or combat at all times. The ruins or Rorin, the tower where Minato meets his future son. I need to be a part of that mission somehow. I might be able to glean some information about the future me. Kazuo thought as he finally arrived at the village gates. It hadn't taken him more than a minute. His speed had increased leagues and bounds from when he had been just an assistant in the front lines of the Third Ninja World War. And his stats clearly showed it. Stats. Name, Kazuo. Race, human. Age, 13. Strength, B. Endurance, C+. Agility, B. Intelligence, B+. Charisma, B. Chakra, B. Skills, asterisk. I won't be showing all the skills, just some of his main ones as there's quite a lot now. Asterisk. Time loop, rank 2. Minato Taijutsu, 10 out of 10. Advanced Shuriken Jutsu, 6 out of 10. Intermediate Kenjutsu, 7 out of 10. Beginner Fuin Jutsu, 5 out of 10. Paper Clone, 10 out of 10. Paper God Technique, 10 out of 10. Paper Illusion, 9 out of 10. Paper Shuriken, 10 tenths. Shunshin / Body Flicker Jutsu, 10 out of 10. Hiding Like a Mole Technique, 10 out of 10. Eam Release, Mind Exhaustion, 5 out of 10. Eam Release, Mind Break, 4 out of 10. Water Release, Severing Water Wave, 9 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Bullet, 10 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Wall, 8 out of 10. Kazuo's list of jutsu had grown massive. The biggest contributor to this had been his 2 mastered chakra natures given by the system. Water Release Chakra Nature, 10 out of 10. Eam Release Chakra Nature, 10 out of 10. More precisely, it had been the Water Release Chakra Nature. It had allowed him to master dozens of water-style jutsu at speeds almost unheard of. Eam Release, on the other hand, had been a puzzle. He had managed to create 2 jutsu on his own, the mind break just and the mind exhaustion jutsu. By injecting his own chakra, which had been turned into the in chakra, into someone's chakra system and then using that chakra to attack the user's mind, that was the basis of the two jutsu. This would normally be an impractical jutsu, however Kazuo had managed to find a way to use it consistently in combat, more precisely in traps. By injecting his in chakra into papers that he then turned invisible with his paper illusion, he could scatter them around the battlefield, and the moment that one of the papers got touched by an enemy, it would release the in chakra into their chakra system. Looking around, Kazuo quickly found his subordinates. They would be under him whilst on this mission. "Hello, my name's Kazuo. I'll be the leader of this mission. We don't have time to waste. I'll explain the mission details whilst we head to the destination," Kazuo said toward the three ninjas wearing leaf headbands. The three gave a quick nod before Kazuo used the body flicker jutsu to disappear from his location. He had to lower his speed quite a lot at the beginning as he tried to find a place where the three underlings could follow him. After around half an hour of using body flicker, Kazuo finally spoke up. "The mission is the assassination of a rebel in the daimyo court. I'll be doing the assassination whilst you all cause a disturbance on the right corner of the fire capital," Kazuo said before closing his mouth and continuing. "They're useless," Kazuo thought to himself as he gave them a side glance discreetly. "I would have rather just gone ahead by myself." Kazuo thought in annoyance, however this was another part of the Jonin test that he had to pass. The ability to command other ninja on the battlefield. Kazuo had no need to make them cause a disturbance, however he needed to at least make use of them. People often compared Jonin and S-rank ninja, however they were completely different from one another. An S-rank ninja was someone who could take on an entire small ninja village by themselves, for example, the Waterfall Village or something of a similar scale. Whilst a Jonin was someone who could have S-rank power, however also had a role in the command unit of the village. Chapter 97, The Four-Leaf Ninja continued their run through the dense forests of the Fire Country. It was one of the distinguishing features as well as one of the main reasons as to why the Fire Country faced the most opposition during the Great Ninja Wars. The land was abundant with resources that the other great countries envied. This caused the daimyo of the Fire Country to be the richest man in all of the elemental nations, and having such economic strength meant that he had the power to finance the leaf much more than the other daimyo could finance their own respective hidden villages. Another reason as to why the hidden leaf had such support from the daimyo was the fact that the daimyo was a descendant of the Senju clan. And thus the relationship between the village and the daimyo had always been good. Kazuo continued to use a low-powered body flicker so that his team could keep up with him. He hadn't really noticed the change as much, how strong he had gotten, until he compared himself to regular shinobi. Hours continued to pass, and soon enough the four of them arrived at the halfway point to the fire capital. "Stop here, we're camping the night," Kazuo announced as he quickly placed his hand on the ground and used the earth tremor jutsu ceaselessly to check if any enemies were nearby. Turns out there were. Close, too close, Kazuo thought as his chakra surged, however it was already too late. A hand touched the back of his neck. Kazuo managed to turn around to see the attacker. It was a man with a white mask wearing black gloves, however Kazuo could still identify the man, as just above his gloves, a sliver of skin showed. It was dark purple skin. Fucking Danzo, Kazuo thought to himself as he felt the world around him darken. A moment later, Kazuo's dead body fell on the floor. Arriving at the same location as before on his second turn, Kazuo stopped just like he had. "Using myself as bait, what am I? Goku's tail?" Kazuo thought as he grit his teeth, inwardly counting the seconds as he spoke up. A moment later, a hand touched the back of his head just like it had on the previous turn. However, Kazuo didn't feel the poison spreading through his brain this time, as he turned to face the man and a large smile split across his face. "Kai bitch." His entire body lit up, and in less than a split second, he exploded. Unfortunately, the attacker wasn't done so easily. He had already expected Kazuo to launch similar tactics, and as such he had prepared a substitution jutsu just in case. The only thing damaged by Kazuo's explosion had been a wooden log. "Danzo, you bastard, you even researched my combat strategy." Kazuo thought before he took a deep breath and walked from behind the tree where he had been hidden. His mind immediately focused as his angered expression turned into a poker face and his emotions became as cold as ice. Seems like Lord Danzo has a grudge against me. Is this his way of lowering the amount of support for Minato-sensei? I guess he would be rooting for Orochimaru. Kazuo mumbled as he continued walking toward the enemy. His pose was carefree as if he hadn't just been attacked at all. Kazuo, you are a nuisance. Your reputation has grown far too large and then you go ahead and ally yourself with the Hyuga clan. This goes against the Leaf's interests and as such you will be disposed of. Those are Lord Danzo's words. The masked Umbu said before he motioned with his hand. A moment later 6 more Umbu appeared. The 3-leaf ninja on Kazuo's team had already been knocked out. They hadn't even seen who had attacked them before they had lost consciousness. You're planning on using a Yamanaka jutsu to implant memories into them so they think I betrayed the Leaf and went rogue before all 3 of them teamed up and killed me? Kazuo asked with a soft tone before nodding his head. I would have done the same, Kazuo said before he raised one hand, making a hand seal. Unfortunately, I'm on a pretty serious mission so I don't have time to dally with you all. Do forgive me for being so impolite. Kazuo said as the corners of his lips turned up slightly. The 7 root ninjas didn't wait any longer as all of them rushed towards Kazuo. 2 stayed at the back line and crouched down, making quick hand seals whilst 5 others with the one who had attacked Kazuo leading them, rushed towards him. Do you know what mastering a chakra nature means? Kazuo asked them suddenly. The 7 didn't seem to care for his words causing Kazuo's lips to curl even higher. Paper release, paper illusion. It didn't even take a split second. One moment the 8 of them with Kazuo included were in a green dense forest in the land of fire and in the next moment there was only darkness, complete and utter darkness. Kazuo's figure immediately melded with the darkness around him, causing him to disappear from the root Umbu's sight. What? The Poison Umbu otherwise known as Torian Aburame muttered as he gazed around however he couldn't see anything. His sense of balance had been completely ruined as he barely managed to stand up and the 2 Umbu who were likely Yamanaka had already fallen to the ground from disbalance. Can you sense him? Torian asked the Yamanaka who were known as great chakra sensors. No sir, everything around us is emitting chakra, it's impossible to pinpoint his location. It was at this moment that a voice was heard. It came from the back of the 2 fallen Yamanaka Umbu. Don't worry, I don't plan on hiding. I wanted to ask you all a question however. Kazuo said as he appeared behind the 2 root Umbu. His hands were already clutching their heads. Release, mind break. A split second later, he released their heads causing the 2 to fall onto the pitch-black darkness, looking as if they were falling endlessly until their figures completely disappeared. What is the difference between illusion and reality? Kazuo asked, a wide cruel smirk on his face as his body was once more engulfed by the darkness. Chapter 98. What is the difference between illusion and reality? Kazuo asked, a wide cruel smirk on his face as his body was once more engulfed by the darkness. Torian felt the surrounding darkness almost become tangible as his hands lightly shook. Even for a shinobi veteran like himself, someone so talented that he had managed to become the left hand of Lord Danzo, he still found Kazuo dangerous. Extremely so. It's been a while, feeling these emotions. Torian thought to himself before trying to seal those emotions once more. Kazuo didn't let them even take a breath to calm themselves down however as his voice was heard once more. This time it came from all directions, resonating throughout the pitch-black darkness. Each of us lives bound and dependent on our individual knowledge. What someone else perceives might not be what you do. Kazuo's voice said. A moment later, 2 more curling screams were heard. Torian turned to face the shinobi only to find them still standing however their eyes were completely white and their mouths hanging wide open. It was at this moment that Torian was looking at them that he saw 2 pitch-black hands extend from the darkness and tear the heads off the 2 Umbu's shoulders. The 7 shinobi had whittled down to only 3 now. Torian however had already formed a plan in his mind. Despite the circumstances, his emotions had already become as cold as ever. This is likely a physical illusion of some sort. If that's the case, then all we have to do is break it, Torian announced to the remaining 2 root umbu, who quickly nodded their heads in understanding. Without wasting a single moment, all 3 of them formed hand signs at a speed almost imperceptible to the human eye. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. Lighting release, Lightning Bullet. Wind style, Wind Slash. In a moment, 3 elemental jutsu were launched at the same time. However, Torian didn't stop at only that, as he threw 3 more paper tag kunai following the jutsu. With a large fireball, a speeding lightning bullet that crackled towards its destination, and an almost invisible large wind slash that converged all together at the end, as well as the power of 3 explosion tags. Boom! A loud explosion occurred as the very ground under them shook. It felt as if the area around them was going to collapse at any moment. However, Torian's expression was anything but great. The darkness around them had disappeared, only for it to change into a large wasteland, bloody corpses all around them, whilst a large blood-red moon radiated light onto their bodies. Kazuo's voice once more resonated around them. This time it seemed to spread throughout the entire bloodied battlefield. However, both knowledge and awareness are equivocal. What might be one's reality, might be another's illusion. It was at this moment that the bloody corpses under the 2 umbus beside Torian lifted their arms. They took hold of the umbu's ankles and dragged them deep underground. The only thing left behind in their wake was the horrid screams of the corpses that had dragged them underground. It seems like Lord Danzo was correct as always, Torian said as sweat dripped down from his forehead. Was he? Kazuo's voice asked. For a moment after, silence engulfed the entire battlefield. A second after, however, this silence was broken by the sound of flesh and blood being torn apart as Kazuo's hand speared right through Torian's heart. Or is Danzo just living in his own fantasies? SQCHLK. With a quick movement, Kazuo took his arm back. With no strength in his legs and body, Torian fell down onto the ground that was quickly changing color. It was no longer a battlefield. They were back in the same grassy field where he had killed Kazuo during a previous turn. They hadn't actually moved at all. Looking around, Torian saw the 6 corpses. They had been put under an illusion from the start, no, maybe even before that. The only scene that told of a battle was the trampled trees showing signs of being hit by elemental jutsu. I'm sorry, Lord Danzo, it seems like we were too late, he's already bloomed. With those last thoughts, Torian's eyes glazed over as the light disappeared from them. His soul is heading towards the Pure Land. Sigh. Releasing a sigh, Kazuo sat down on Torian's body, feeling his remaining chakra reserves almost completely drained. That was hard. Kazuo thought to himself as he remembered the preparations and the turns it had taken him to achieve this outcome. 3 turns to pinpoint the location of each one of the enemies, 4 turns to create a good enough illusion to trap them inside it, 7 times to manage to pull off the first part of the illusion, and 18 times during the second illusion. In total, this battle lasted a total of 32 turns. Kazuo thought as he released another shallow sigh before getting up on his feet and proceeding to head to each of the umbu and sealing their bodies into his wrist guards. After cleaning up the entire battlefield and only leaving 2 corpses behind, which he quickly charred completely black with a fire-style jutsu, he turned towards his companions. As I thought, they're completely useless. Kazuo thought to himself before he went ahead and woke them up. Captain, what happened? They questioned. Kazuo simply shook his head lightly and motioned towards the 2 charred corpses. Nothing, just some rogue shinobi. Stay on guard from now on. Kazuo replied as he walked away from the group to set up his tent. Chapter 99. Whilst setting up his tent, Kazuo's mind was like a typhoon of thoughts as he replayed the battle over in his head again and again, finding anything he could have done better and trying to find a solution. Kazuo had first set up a complete array of papers around the surroundings in a 50-meter radius. Then he had created a paper clone and masked his own presence at the same time, making the enemy as well as his own subordinates think that the clone was him. The paper array had then been used to create the darkness illusion that the enemy root ninja had been trapped in. However, that wouldn't have been enough to fool or keep the root ninja inside, so he had targeted the strongest enemy right from the beginning. The paper clone that had been attacked had been laced with his own in-release chakra, which he had used to slightly influence Torian's brain and cause it to become exhausted at a much quicker rate than usual. Of course, his in manipulation was great, but his illusions based on in chakra were still lacking. The only reason the entire thing worked was because of the physical illusion of the papers he had arranged in the surroundings ahead of time. A few turns later, after the enemy broke free of the darkness illusion, Kazuo had repeated the process and added another layer. The desolate battlefield illusion had been another paper layer arranged around the darkness illusion layer, essentially making an illusion on top of another illusion, on top of the slight illusion from the in-release chakra in Torian's chakra system. All of these preparations had led to Torian not even managing to move a single step before he had already been killed. The biggest possible downfall of this arrangement of techniques is the in illusion. I need to master more illusion jutsu so that I can research deeper into the mechanics of how they work, Kazuo thought to himself as he finished setting up the green tent. You three will take turns watching, each turn consisting of 2 hours, Kazuo said to the 3 Chunin before walking inside his tent and lying down. An added bonus to the in-release chakra mastery was the fact that he could use it to forcefully put himself to sleep instantly. Exactly 6 hours later, Kazuo woke up instantly and got up from his makeshift bed on the ground. Using 3 hand signs, he quickly sealed the bed as well as the tent. "Wake them up," Kazuo announced as he pointed to the sleeping teammates. "Yes, sir." It didn't take more than 3 minutes for the entire team to be ready to start their run toward the fire capital again. Kazuo didn't even need to clean up the 2 charred bodies, as the Chunin had already done that while he was asleep. Having subordinates is nice, if only they were more capable, Kazuo thought to himself, feeling the need to release a sigh. Hours passed once more, just like yesterday, but their speed had increased slightly from the day before. It seemed the ambush had put the 3 Chunin on edge. I guess I should ask them, Kazuo thought as he turned his head slightly. "What are your names?" Immediately after his question, the 3 replied. "Chunin Yajiro Kasuma. Chunin Kasukora. Chunin Azuma Soda." "All right, we're close to the fire capital and should arrive there in a few minutes. Don't stress yourselves out. You just need to cause a distraction after I send you the signal," Kazuo said. "How will you send the signal, Captain?" Yajiro questioned. A moment later, Kazuo threw 3 paper balls their way. "These will change color when I send the signal." "I see," Azuma replied with a nod before returning to silence once more. The 4 of them continued on for around half an hour until they arrived at a location where the gates of the fire capital were visible. "We will not be entering normally but sneaking in. This would usually not be possible, however, someone from the inside will help us by masking our chakra on the chakra sensors. That still means that we shouldn't be seen physically, however," Kazuo said before taking a harsh breath and turning to face the 3 Chunin. "You 3 will be heading to the right corner of the capital. That area is a tourist attraction and thus an important part of the city. Your job is to simply cause as much distraction as possible while keeping the casualties as low as possible. Preferably, there should be no casualties at all," Kazuo said as he pressed 2 fingers on his wrist, summoning forth around 30 smoke bombs and handing 10 to each of the Chunin. "Now get going and keep an eye on the paper ball. When I send the signal, start immediately," Kazuo ordered, causing the trio to quickly nod their heads in understanding. With a nod of his own, Kazuo used the body flicker jutsu immediately to head to the completely opposite corner where the trio would be causing the disturbance. The 3 were left standing as they saw Kazuo disappear in an instant. "Is he really just a Jonin?" Kasuk questioned as his gaze lingered on Kazuo's previous location for a moment. "It doesn't matter what he is. Let's get going," Yajiro responded, causing both Kasuk and Azuma to give a quick nod. A moment later, the 3 had already disappeared from their position. Meanwhile, Kazuo was already inside the fire capital and perched on top of a small building, his figure completely obscured by the use of paper illusions. "This place really is much more advanced than the Leaf," Kazuo thought as he looked at the bustling city around him. The buildings appeared to be made of much higher quality materials and seemed to have been designed by a far greater architect than those in the Hidden Leaf. The people below were much better dressed than the usual leaf villagers as well. Turning his gaze away from the street below him, Kazuo looked at the building across the street, a large Japanese-style mansion. 2 guards who looked like samurai were stationed at the gates, while more than a dozen could be seen in the courtyard of the building. I guess the time has come. The time for my beautiful art to be shown to these mongrels, Kazuo thought as a devilish smile rose on his face. Chapter 100, I guess the time has come. The time for my beautiful art to be shown to these mongrels, Kazuo thought as a devilish smile rose on his face. Making the tiger hand seal, Kazuo quickly channeled his chakra in a specific pattern. Normally he didn't have to use hand seals to interact with his papers, however by using a hand seal he could extend his range further than usual as well as use the technique more precisely, which would lead to him releasing a small chakra signal. Time to get this show on the road, Kazuo thought as he brought his hands down. It didn't take more than a few seconds for massive explosions to be heard coming from the other side of the city. Alright, let's go. With that final thought, Kazuo vanished from his position. With speed that surpassed most if not all Jonin-level ninjas, Kazuo arrived on top of the mansion gates in less than a second. The guards hadn't even noticed his movement as Kazuo ignored them completely and vanished once more, this time appearing next to the main building of the mansion complex. At the same second that he appeared, his body was quickly enveloped by hundreds of paper sheets. Those paper sheets then changed color a mere fraction of a second later. To the onlookers, the position where Kazuo was at now looked just like before, with nobody in sight. Alright, the first stage is done, Kazuo muttered as he placed his hand on the wall. Earth-style, tremor sense jutsu. Closing his eyes, Kazuo felt all of the vibrations inside the mansion. 15 guards, 4 of them are positioned near a room at the center of the building. That's where the target is most likely. With those thoughts, Kazuo opened his eyes and lifted his hand from the wall. His next course of action was to get inside of the building. And so he did. He started walking towards the front door without hiding at all, his body completely covered with papers that made his figure completely invisible to the eyes of the guards. He simply walked into the building moments later and then continued his way towards the center without hurry, as if he was taking a stroll inside his own house. Around a minute later, he arrived at his destination. A large sliding door stood before him. Making a single hand seal, the illusion that kept him invisible was cancelled and instead another illusion took its place. Now he looked just like the guard he had seen at the front door of the mansion. Without making a hand seal at all, a bunch of papers tore off his body and quickly gathered up together, making a paper clone. With his preparations done, Kazuo opened the sliding door quickly. The face of the guard illusion appeared stressed and hurried as he spoke. There's been a large attack on the other side of the city. Inside the center room, 4 guards stood around a large king-sized bed, where a middle-aged man was currently enjoying himself. What? One of the guards asked as he turned towards Kazuo, his hand already holding a long katana. Kazuo looked at the 4 before releasing a soft sigh. All 4 of the guards were samurai. I didn't even need to do all this preparation. With that thought, Kazuo together with his paper clone immediately used the shunshin and appeared right in front of the large bed. What? That was all the target could mutter before Kazuo and his clone both detonated themselves in a humongous explosion. Or so it seemed. Kazuo hadn't even been there to begin with. A shadow clone just outside of the mansion quickly used shunshin to appear next to the ruined building. Quickly surveying around, he found what he had been looking for. The dead body of the target. With a nod of his head, he quickly released the jutsu and exploded in a puff of smoke. Meanwhile, the real Kazuo was already on his way to get out of the fire capital. 2.5 minutes later, Kazuo arrived outside of the city, and 30 seconds later, he arrived at the meeting point of his team. The mission hadn't taken even 15 minutes. I had a harder time when I was promoted to a Chunin, Kazuo muttered to himself. It was only 2 minutes later that he noticed something wrong. They're late, Kazuo thought as he felt like killing the Chunin himself. Did they get caught? Kazuo inwardly thought as he gave a light sneer. It was at this moment that he saw the 3 Chunin under him appear around 200 meters away in front of him. And together with the 3, 4 shinobi were chasing after them. Sigh. I knew it would have been easier to just do it alone. Kazuo muttered before he made a hand seal and disappeared underground. Meanwhile, at the same time, 2 shadow clones appeared where he stood. One of the shadow clones headed up the trees and used paper illusion to hide himself whilst the other stood still. 8 seconds later, the trio arrived. Sir, we're being chased. We must get away as quickly as possible, Azuma quickly said as he looked at Kazuo, who only furrowed his brows. Why should we? Azuma, Kisuke and Yajiro's expressions quickly turned confused as they looked at Kazuo. It was at this time that the 4 enemy shinobi appeared before them. They're all Jonin, sir, Kisuke quickly informed Kazuo. Doesn't matter, even a Gennin can kill a Jonin, Kazuo replied as he started walking towards the 4. It was at this moment that 2 of the 4 enemy shinobi fell down and blood got spewed high into the air. What? The 2 remaining shinobi quickly raised their guard as they gave a side glance at their dead comrades, not daring to fully leave Kazuo out of their sights. It was at this moment that Kazuo used the body flicker jutsu. His speed quickly multiplied as he arrived in front of the 2 shinobi. Katsu. And at that same moment, the shadow clone's body exploded, severely injuring one of the shinobi who couldn't get away in time whilst lightly injuring the other. The one that hadn't been severely wounded, however, didn't have a great fate await him. The position he had jumped to was the one where the real Kazuo had been waiting. At the same moment that the shinobi's feet touched the ground, Kazuo's hand tore up from it and grabbed his ankles, bringing him fully underground in less than a moment and severing his neck. Meanwhile, the shinobi who had been wounded badly didn't even have time to react as an invisible paper shuriken tore through the back of his head. Thump! With that over, Kazuo quickly tore his way above ground and dusted himself off before turning toward the 3 Chunin. All done, let's go. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 6. Peace.